Fog and gusty winds ahead for this first full week of 2025 as we're wrapping up what has been a busy holiday season. It's back to work and school now, and our headlines start off with a patchy morning fog. We also have a chance for some Sierra snow showers coming into our Monday, and on the heels of that, we get into the gusty wind. So a couple of weather elements to dig in here. We've got our full weather playlist and in-depth forecasts, explainers, and weather specials on ABC 10. Plus, make sure you download it for free wherever you stream on TV. Our forecast lows heading into our Monday morning will still dig into the 30s to right around the low 40s with areas of patchy dense fog in parts of the region. We're going to pick up some northwest winds, which will start to scour out and dry out the environment a bit. But before we get to that, we've got the dense fog developing for the Monday morning commute. So as we start to head back to routine, we're going to deal with some of the weather elements as well. Now, we won't hang on to it too long into the afternoon, but even at the noontime hour, still some patches of that limited visibility in through the Central Valley, including the capital region and through the northern San Joaquin Valley and towards the Delta. Now, we've got a disruptor in that forecast, and that is that low pressure system. It's an inside slider. So what that means is it's just going to slide down the east side of the state and give us the chance of some Sierra snow, whereas the valley is going to stay on the dry side. On the heels of that low, though, is where we get those gusty winds. As far as the precipitation coming into our Monday, we're dry through the valley. Here we go. During our Monday evening, we pick up the clouds and some patches of snow. Not much in the way of accumulation. It'll be less than an inch for many of us. But again, the bigger picture is going to showcase on the back edge of that the wind coming in. A wind advisory posted starting up 10 p.m. on Monday. That'll take us through Tuesday and early Wednesday at 7 a.m. But you'll notice that the focus area is just through the foothills and parts of the lower Sierra. So it's not necessarily a valley impact or towards the coast. It's going to be largely affecting just that little strip right through the foothills and the Sierra. We'll pick up occasional gusty winds for the west side of the valley, but it's not quite at that threshold that will have that wind advisory. That will be true for much of this area, shaded kind of in that purple color right there. That's where we're really going to see the focus of those offshore winds and some very dry conditions developing, limiting the fog into our middle of our work week forecast. You can see the setup here. That low pressure system just kind of slides off to the east here. A quick moving system settles into the Great Basin. In opposition, we've got that building ridge of high pressure. Now, once we start to see that low move off to the east a little bit more, we'll see the high pressure ridge control our weather. That's going to keep that storm track well to the north of us. No weather systems really bumping through that high pressure ridge. So we're going to start off with a very dry outlook for this first full week of January. As you can see, the moisture plumes just heading right up to the north of us. And even at that, when they try to move towards that high pressure ridge, they absolutely dry out. So after a wet end to December, we're going to dry out for the beginning of January. Now, this is a little bit of a concern, not too much given that our snowpack's looking pretty healthy, but this is the time frame that we have 50% of our annual precipitation. December looked pretty good. January starting off dry, so we just need to get things going by the end of January through February, and we should fare pretty nicely here before we start to see some of the drying take effect for California. In terms of how the drought monitor is looking, since we are heading into this slightly drier weather pattern, I did just want to revisit this for a moment. We started off the water year with about 71% of the state in abnormally dry conditions. Our drought severity and coverage index was at 82, so it was pretty much universal and widespread drought conditions that were borderline drought, most of it just abnormally dry. Many of us saw a pretty good year last year for our water year, and that helped to just kind of suppress some of the drought growth throughout the dry summer months. Now, fast forward to where we are right now. The north has pretty much been eliminated for drought conditions, whereas the central and southern part of the state, we're starting to see some growth here. The southern part of the state off to one of the driest starts of the water year on record here. You can see moderate, severe, even extreme drought starting to grow. And again, most of that in the southern part of the state. That's what's contributing to that growing number for the drought severity and coverage index now at 97. I will say, though, given that the biggest reservoirs are in the northern part of the state, this is concerning, but it's nice to see that we are starting to store more and more of that water due to above average conditions in the northern part of the state. In terms of downtown Sacramento this month, a little bit on the dry side, but for the season, again, we look at it as a whole, not just one little chunk of time here. We're down a little bit for the month, but as far as the beginning of the water year, October 1st, we're up by 1 inch. Nice to see those numbers there. Hey, speaking of some good numbers, let's take a look at that first snow survey of the year. That was on January 2nd, 91% of average for Phillips Station. That's where that big snow tube goes into the ground. They pull it out. They look at the snowpack and they analyze it for all sorts of things. What's the water content in that snow? What's the depth of that snow? To determine when it melts, what's going to fill our reservoirs as gravity takes it downstream into our big reservoirs that are holding tanks of water that feed the state during the dry summer months. Statewide, the percentage is at 108, so snow surveys are looking pretty good at this point. As far as breaking it down into chunks and areas, the Northern Sierra at 156% of average as of January 3rd. Central Sierra 92, Southern Sierra 70, and that just kind of highlights some of the drier conditions in the central and southern part of the state. So our statewide average to date now at 106%. It's just because we are heading into a drier stretch here. We're going to see our gains kind of chip away, given that usually this is our wettest month of the year. Major reservoir supply levels, since this is, again, one of the areas that we store a lot of that water. I know I said as of December 14th, but it's as of January 3rd, so that number I should have changed there. Capacity, we're still looking at, generally about 70 to 75% capacity, so we still have the holding capacity to pull in some of that melting snow, but we're well above average, almost 130% of average. Folsom, 37% capacity, 90% of average. If you have seen the American River and the Sacramento River, they are running pretty high. So water managers are trying to make way for some of the recent gains that we've seen in the Sierra. As we turn our attention to the Central Sierra, well, we're at about 70% of capacity right now, still above average though, so things are looking really good. Millerton a little bit behind there, 82% of average, but again, that's one of the smaller reservoirs in the state. In terms of sheer numbers, this is what it looks like. There is a drastic difference between Eureka at almost 26 inches of rain since October 1st. Compare that to Los Angeles, 3/100ths of an inch of rain. That's why there is almost a stark line of demarcation between the very wet north this year and the very dry south this water year. And here's where we can really see some of those differences highlighted with the above average conditions in the north, below average in the orange, and those deficits continuing to grow for places like Los Angeles, almost 4 inches behind where we should be. San Diego about 4.5+ inches behind where we should be for Santa Barbara. So along the central coast and southern coast, it's been very dry. But I will say this, it's following a very typical La Nina pattern. This continues to grow in the equatorial Pacific, where a wetter than average water year tends to be the case in a La Nina year for the Pacific Northwest through parts of Northern California, and drier than average conditions for Southern California. Our futurecast is going to show we're not going to see much beyond tomorrow evening's snow flurries that pass through for the Sierra. That high pressure ridge keeping everything well to the north of us here. And even as we head into the middle of the month, it's still looking dry, not only for California, but even for the Pacific Northwest. A likely cooler setup across the west, but again, a likely drier one through the middle of the month. Taking a look at some numbers here as we kick into our new work and school week. Highs will be in the 40s for the Sierra, 50s down low, 50s along the coast after some areas of patchy dense fog throughout parts of the valley. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds and highs in the 50s. And again, we'll quickly turn our attention to those gusty winds on Tuesday. Overall, a dry forecast, though. Just a few overnight flurries Monday into early Tuesday for the mountains. We're dry throughout the foothills and for the coast as well. I'll look at our extended forecast for the valley. We'll keep it dry here. Temperatures kind of hovering right about, if not slightly above average for afternoon highs. No real impact days out there for us. We're going to keep it largely dry. Could be a good opportunity to kind of get out there, clean up some of the wet stuff that's been brewing over the month of December. Everything is kind of muddy and may need a little bit of cleanup, and we've got a stretch of some pretty nice weather to do that.